Okay, so we've got Ashley invited in. She should pop up here in just a minute. So thank you for being patient as we are waiting for these. Here we go. I see her. There's something going on with Ashley's phone, I think. Ashley, you just disappeared. Okay. I'm going to try to invite her in again. I'm talking to her via Messenger right now, so we can find out what's going on. There we go. Okay, so Ashley, I have you invited. I see that you're here, and it is telling me that you are unable to be added to the video right now. Oh, let's try again. I think it's gonna let this time. Bring Ashley. There we go. I'm not sure what you just did on your phone, but it just popped your little picture up at the top of the video, and it's adding you right now. That's what it should be doing as soon as you're on. It shouldn't make you wait. There you are.
Yes,
Hey there, beautiful.
I've figured out that my computer is too old. Yay. So, my cell phone it is, I guess.
Yeah, you can't do live videos on you can't do a dual live off of a computer. That's why I have to use my phone instead of my computer for this.
Gotcha.
So as long as we're both on our mobile device, it'll let us do the dual video.
Okay. Can you see comments? Because sometimes I can't on my phone.
Yes, and I actually have the video up on my computer in front of me so that I can very quickly respond when people comment. So
Awesome. If I can't see them, let me know what they are.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, I'll be watching those and keeping an eye out for those.
Cool.
So as long as we're both on our mobile device, it'll let us do the dual video.
Okay. Can you see comments? Because sometimes.
Okay. So we are good to go. And I've verified it on my computer. Everybody can hear us and see us, and we're all good. So
Awesome.
Get us started, girlfriend.
So yes, as everybody has known, I've been kind of teasing everybody by a topic, and I finally introduced the topic as sex addiction. And this is a very high valued topic. A lot of people agree with me, and a lot of people don't, and that is completely fine. But this is going to be more of a informational talk about things that have been researched, actual therapists that have agreed that sex addiction is not a thing. And I know that a lot of people have commented already about people that they know being diagnosed with having sex addiction through counselors and therapists and things like that. And so they're really, really intrigued by what we have to say about it. I personally, so I'm going to say that word very with a lot of emphasis, personally do not feel that it is an addiction. And I do not feel that it's that sex itself or sexual acts or addictions, for all of the reasons that we're going to talk about today. So, and how do you feel about it, AJ?
as far as the science goes, and I guess before I get into it, I do want to say that we're not just pulling these things out of our butt. We are talking about things that we have read about, that we have researched about, and that we have talked with not only each other, but other um, people in the sexology field. And, we look at peer-reviewed scientific research when we're talking about this. It's not just, um, this is not just our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it still is such a new topic that it does come down still to a personal opinion. There are a lot of people who say that sex addiction is definitely should be in the DSM-5 and should be a diagnosed pathology. And then there are people like the two of us who believe that sex addiction is not, it's not a proper diagnosis, and there are reasons for that,
Yes.
and why we agree that it should not be in the DSM-5 as a pathology.
Yes. And explain a little bit for people who don't know what the DSM-5 is.
Okay, so the DSM-5 that's what physicians use, the insurance companies use to do all of their billing and everything for their diagnoses. So it's the one big place for the health community where they can go and say, okay, this person has this diagnosis, and it has very specific criteria that have to be met in order to fall into that specific diagnosis. And so if something doesn't fit into that criteria, or the community cannot agree on criteria for it, then it does not get put in there, and it does not get listed as something that is a diagnosis.
Yes. So cool. And also just to add to that too, we are not medical, providers. We are not counselors and therapists. We are coaches. And so we have really strong opinions about how great and wonderful counselors and therapists can be, especially as a referral network for ourselves, for people that do come in with things that they need to talk a little bit more in depth about, or things that they were diagnosed with through counselors and therapists. So we're not bashing them by any means either. We are, when we talk about this stuff, and as mentioned before, somebody said that their ex-husband was in counseling and their counselor diagnosed him with sex addiction, things like that. It's just, we are going to be showing you the research and telling you the information that we have been learning to kind of maybe chew on that a little bit, at least, oh, well, maybe that specific counselor was wrong. Maybe they just weren't as educated about it, or, maybe they didn't know these things that we know now. So, keep in mind that too.
Right,
But is there
because
anything, go ahead.
good health, good health is health that you question.
Mm-hmm.
You always want to, you can go online and you can find a ton of information and a ton of clinics that treat sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the the field of psychology itself has not agreed upon this.
Yeah.
And it's because honestly in the last 10, 20 years, are we're kind of going through this whole um, I don't want to call it a sexual revolution, but then again, we kind of are.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at sexuality in a different way. We're looking at, in 2010, okay, this is only 9 years ago, they took um, BDSM out of out of the books and said, wait a minute, this is not a pathology. This is not an issue. So questioning things, remember, people used to think that the earth was flat. And then and
Yes.
and now they can look at it and say, well, that scientifically that's not true. So
True. Yeah.
questioning things is how we make sure that we're being taken care of. And
Exactly.
I have, of course, very strong feelings about that as a cancer survivor, with the medical community telling me that there was nothing wrong with me and that it was all in my head. and I
Yeah.
ended up, having cancer at a
Yep.
much higher stage than I should have at that point. So I love my physicians. I love the therapy community, and I also love the coach community because we can all work together to provide
Yes.
the absolute best healthcare for our clients.
Yes. And before we get into the sex addiction information too, I also want to just top it off that no matter what your religious belief, no matter how you want to choose to live your life, and whether or not you agree or disagree with the things that we're saying, the reason that we're doing this is to at least make you question it, make you go, maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. Or that has absolutely nothing to do with me. I don't want to watch this anymore. Doesn't matter. We're just doing this to make you question. You do, and I am this is the one thing that I always tell people. It is not hypocritical of you to change your mind. It's not.
Right.
It's part of growth. So if this changes your mind and makes you think, maybe she's right. Maybe those facts really do hit home with you. It's okay. You don't have to be like, I don't agree with that because I've disagreed with this for 15 years. Change your damn mind. It's okay. It's all right. I changed my mind about a lot of things in life.
Right. And feel free to ask us for resources and feel free to send us resources. This is a discussion.
Yes, a discussion, civil discussion. And yes, please keep in mind the rules and regulations of the group. No slander, discrimination, things like that. Keep it civil, people. But yeah, let's roll it. Let's roll with it. You ready?
Yep, go for it, girlfriend.
Cool. Okay. So, one of the first things, as everybody knows, is that I do not agree that it is an addiction. The reason I do not agree with this is because even in the dictionary, it does say that addiction is defined as the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. So activity being the word that I don't particularly agree with because sex it can be an activity. So that's what I don't agree. I don't even agree with the dictionary, the damn dictionary. But sex addiction is anyone interested in sex beyond the confines of a predetermined and conventional value system. So that's the thing that really trips my trigger, is that it's predetermined and conventional. So that's the one thing that us as sex coaches are very positive about, is that nothing's normal. The word normal and predetermined and conventional, it's all normal. What's normal?
Right.
It shouldn't be a thing. What's normal for you could not be normal for Roger down the road, you know? Or Sylvia or whomever, so you can have your own predetermined and conventional values and think that Roger down the road that has women going in and out of his house, he's a sex addict. No, maybe he's just a stud. That's the one thing that just really bothers me about the description of sex addict, is that it's a predetermined and conventional value system that can be questioned and accused and ultimately labeled as an addict. And I have recovering addicts and I have full-on blown addicts in my life, and they are addicted. They're addicted to substances. They cannot quit. And that's another thing that I don't agree with the addiction, sex addiction, is if you want to stop an addiction, it's usually you're stopping it for the rest of your life. So if you're addicted to heroin and you go to rehab, they're rehabilitating you to live without heroin. You go to sex addiction counseling or whatever, they're telling you to stop sex altogether. And that is not healthy for anybody, in my opinion. Maybe the way you're doing it, you're spending a lot of money, taking away from your family. I can see that being a problem. But telling an addict or rehabilitating an addict, you're telling them to quit that for the rest of their life, or at least try to quit that for the rest of your life. And as we all know, addicts fall off the wagon and everything like that, and that's something completely different. But I view addiction as a little bit different than having anything to do with the sexual realm. Yeah, if you have anything to say about that while I'm reading my notes real quick, go ahead.
Well, I think that the biggest, no, I don't think, I know that the biggest thing that you just touched on was values. And when we're looking at, when we're looking at sex addiction, there are so many different people's values in there. And honestly, and so I've been a coach for a long time, and this is the one thing, and an educator, a teacher, and even working with my teachers and working at the district level with people, people don't know what their personal values are most of the time without sitting down and having those conversations. And when it comes to sex, a lot of us don't have those conversations. We just don't. So looking at the values of the client himself or herself, the people around them who are saying that they have this sex addiction, whether it be their friends or their spouse or their job or whatever. And then you've got the other healthcare professionals in their lives and their own personal values.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I went and participated in a SAR because it made us sit down and really focus on what are our own values around sex and how are we going to be able to look past our own values to help our clients.
Yep.
And because our clients are going to come to us with different sexual needs than we have, different sexual preferences than we have. So we have to be able to do that. Well, a lot of people, they haven't gone through that process to get into that uncomfortable space
Sure.
of this is something that is against my personal values, but I understand that X person has different values than I do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you focused on that, because that, to me, this entire conversation is going to come back to values and communication and boundaries and negotiation.
And that has a lot to do with self sexual exploration, masturbation, you know, self sexual love, and partner sex.
Right.
It all comes to that, and that's what us as sex coaches are really here for, is to help people talk about their values and systems and stuff like that. And that also kind of brings me to kind of come into a lot of people who disagree with me that sex addiction is a thing. Maybe they're dealing with that with their significant other. Maybe their significant other has had an affair and it's, you know, you stop that trust in that relationship. Maybe their ex-husband, like the lady that had commented before, saying that, you know, he turned out to be pedophilic and liked child and was in child abuse, and his counselor was then telling him that his sex addiction turned that into that, which I think that that's completely I just think that blowed my mind in a negative manner, that a counselor or a therapist
I
had
mean,
told him that.
yeah, that goes into that whole safe, sane, and consensual piece,
Yes.
which we will definitely do more videos and information sessions on in the future.
And I sent you what I was reading about sex addiction, and maybe we can post it on the page for other people to read it as well. But it was from a psychiatrist that agrees that sex is not an addiction, that it is a symptom or a side effect or whatever you want to call it of something else. So let me name him Todd. And Todd comes in and he is saying that he's a sex addict. He spends hundreds of dollars on porn or prostitutes or whatever, and his wife and his relationship is just shit, and he can't stop masturbating in public, and like he's the extreme case. And so when he would go into a psychiatrist, and a psychiatrist would say, you're addicted to sex. But then when him and his wife come in and she says that he constantly has to clean the dishes and nothing in the house can be dirty, and he has to make sure that the door is locked 3 times before he walks out the door. Well, I bet you $10 that psychiatrist doesn't even know that. And the constant having to masturbate or constantly having to have sex when his urge is there, you know, it could be a side effect of him having an obsessive compulsive disorder. He has to feel the urge. He can't deal with it. He hasn't been able to deal with the coping mechanisms of, oh, I have to do it now and I can't, you have to feed it kind of thing. It could be a side effect of that. Another, thing is that, let's say if your significant other did cheat on you and keeps cheating on you, and that's another thing too, is that a lot of people view it as my significant other as a sex addict. Must be, I have no reason to think it had anything to do with me. Maybe it does. If you guys have not communicated about your sexual values and needs and boundaries and rules, and your husband has a higher libido and you have a really low libido, or vice versa, husband and wife, or wife and wife, or husband and husband, whatever, your partner is opposite of you, they're fulfilling their sexual needs elsewhere, unhealthily, obviously, by causing tension and unnecessary infidelity in their relationship, where communication and openness could have been totally avoidant of all of this. And so then you label sex addiction on somebody that you don't quite understand. You don't want to blame yourself for anything because I didn't do anything wrong. Well, maybe you didn't do anything wrong, but maybe you weren't as open and as communicative as you should have been. And so, trust falls out the window. You got to build trust again. And there could be a bajillion and 10 scenarios of sex addiction labeling, or you thinking that your significant other is a sex addict, or that you're a sex addict. But with all of the research that is done, I don't think that that's true. I think that that's something that can be overcome. I think that it could be a side effect of another actual disorder or mental illness, and again, can be overcome and worked with and worked through. So, and then I'm also a true believer that sex is not a drive. So as I was saying before, with the man with OCD, has to have it, has to feel his needs and drive. I don't think that sex is a drive. I think it is something that us as humans need it to thrive. But I view drive as you have to have water to survive, you have to have food to survive, you have to have air to survive. So that's a drive, things that you need to survive. And so a lot of people who say are sex addicts, this desire, this need. Hold on just a sec, my phone is about to die.
So while we're holding on, I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump in on one of the things that you were saying about the differences that we need to communicate with each other. And one of the things that I talk with my clients about, and something my husband and I have had a lot of conversation about sex, because we do have different drives and we do have different just different needs in that area. So we have had to do a lot of communication and negotiation about that. And I truly believe that anybody who's going to get married or into any kind of relationship where emotions are going to be involved with their sex, that they need to understand who and what each of them is attracted to. So do they have are they focusing on sex? Are they focusing on romance? That's definitely something that you want to talk about when you're getting into a relationship. And then your, orientation. Are you somebody who is 100% focused on the opposite sex? 100% focused on the same sex? Are you somebody who can find either gender equally attractive, and you enjoy having both, the options of having both in your life? And also, what kind of a relationship is important to you? Do you want to have monogamous relationships, or are you somebody who wants and needs to have multiple relationships in your life to feel fulfilled? And those are questions that we need to answer. Oftentimes those don't get discussed. I would say 90% of the time that's not discussed. And then later on down the road, when that, big sexy has worn off in the relationship, the honeymoon phase is over, and one person is happily fulfilled emotionally, and that's all they need, while the other person is not fulfilled sexually, and that's what they need. And that's usually how sex addiction gets diagnosed, is just that we haven't had those conversations. So before somebody is labeled as a sex addict, I definitely think that those conversations must be had, and they are not being had.
I would say even after the person is labeled a sex addict, it needs to be done, because a lot of people who either, number one, label that person or that person labels themselves, they're just casting blame on those behaviors. They're not. So let's say if I was casting a label on someone, I'm casting blame on them that all of our relationship issue is their fault because they're addicted to sex. And that I just don't feel could be it. Like, why would you cast blame on just one person? I am a true believer, and this is why I really want to work with couples, is because there are 3, if not 4 sides to a relationship. There's my side, there's your side, there's us together and how we work, and whatever our issues are could be the 4th reason, kind of thing. So, and so, yeah, the person who labels usually casts blame on the sex addicted person, quote unquote. The person who labels themselves a sex addict, I think, is trying to not cast blame on what that other person might be, promoting to their issue.
Right.
Does that make
They're
sense?
trying to spare them,
Mm-hmm.
to save their feelings, so rather than asking their partner for sex, they're going to go look at porn.
Yep. Yep.
And and that's loving. They're trying to love their partner the way they believe that their partner wants to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, that all comes down to that communication piece,
Yeah.
which is seriously lacking. And we're not saying that couples are doing anything wrong. We're not saying that that you're not communicating at all. It's just, are you communicating about the right things and in the right way? And having those real, honest, vulnerable conversations about personal boundaries and negotiating to say, you know, I I love you enough to allow you to have this because I know that you need it for your own happiness, your own sexual well-being. And just because I don't need it doesn't mean that you don't need it. And it's honestly very rare that 2 people come together and they have exactly the same sexual needs.
Yeah. And desires and fantasies. That's
Yes.
also a thing too. Needs are
Yep.
one thing. But just to kind of pull into my personal, not to get into too much information or depth about it. I know that me and my husband have 2 different desires and needs. And I think this goes for anybody in a partnered relationship too, that your libidos are different levels at different times. And yeah, maybe 75% of the time they match up, but there's still some time that your libidos don't match up either. And then maybe it's fear of, needing more than your significant other, or feeling bad that, oh, how dare I ask for more sex? She's tired or sick, or he's, been working 60 hours, or, something like, how dare I ask for those things? And that's also too something that, it's just a misconstrued label. In a lot of things and a lot of research, especially the thing that we're going to be sharing on Facebook page. He is a psychiatrist and his name is Tracy Todd. And he wrote a book about sex addiction. And this is where I've gotten a lot of my information from. And I apologize if you have echoing. I have to charge my phone. But yeah, and we will do that. And I really wish that you guys read it thoroughly. It is a little bit of a read. It's about a 15-20 minute read, I would say. But it's worth it. You'll see where our points come to the validity. Sorry, I can't work. Um, but yeah, everything like that. Quick, find where I was reading.
Something that particular article did not talk a lot about
Mm-hmm.
was culture and social norms.
Yeah.
And I wish I guess that they would have talked a little bit more about that in that article, but there are 500 other things out there. I can't even tell you everything that I've read about this topic. But cultural and social norms, in order to be a true addiction, okay, it would have to be to fit worldwide. Okay, this means that in every culture of the world, the behaviors that are happening would have to be unacceptable, unhealthy, everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why people can't agree on this because, first of all, looking at research, you have to look at the validity and the reliability of the data that you're looking at. And
Mm-hmm.
again, this article, the one that we read together, did not talk about reliability and validity and all of the science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very, very few studies out there that actually have enough data that is valid and reliable to prove anything. And that's why it's not being put in the book. That's why it's not considered a true diagnosis. And I don't believe that it ever will be, because if you look at the different cultures around the world, the different social norms that happen in different cultures, we cannot agree worldwide that this is a pathology.
Yeah. And the
And the
funny thing
thing,
too is that there are so many online sexual questionnaires. Just, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do this? And if you score a certain percentage of that, you're labeled a sex addict and you need to reach out. Well, I took them. I guess I needed some psychiatric help because I did them and I reached over to my husband and I was like, I guess I'm a sex addict. And he goes, what? And I was like, because I answered 4 questions, yes. I guess I'm a sex addict. But one of those questionnaires, it's an online sexual addiction questionnaire. And it's from a psychiatrist named Dana Putman. And it's on www.onlinesexaddict.org. You can take this questionnaire, okay? And it's a little bit lengthy, but even before you get to the questionnaire, she states that this is not a normed psychological test, and that she even recommended people seeking psychotherapy expertise if they think that. She is a psychiatrist, and she's even telling you my test is bullshit.
right.
Sorry for the layman term, but if you take this, it doesn't mean shit. But how many people really read that? If they're really concerned and they go online for self-help, which we are in that time of life now, you go online for everything. And you're really concerned on whether or not you're a sex addict and this is really having a negative effect on your life. How many people are really going to read those in depth? Or are they just going to find the questionnaire, they're going to take it, and then boom, you're a sex addict.
Right.
And then like, oh my God, I knew it, blah, 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 but even right there stated, this questionnaire is bogus. And that just really heated me and got me mad because I took it and I'm a sex addict, apparently, according to this lady who made this thing. And it was the second one on Google, even the second website. Am I a sex addict? Sex addict, if you were to Google that, it is the second website.
Right.
And what we were told in high school when, the interwebs were happening, and Google, it's the first 5 search engines that you are given that are the most valid. That's the second
Right.
one. So, I mean, it just really upset me about that. But anyway, yes. And it's, as you said before, it's not a pathological thing. It's not pathologicalized on the DSM-5. Because you're right, it has to be worldwide, and it's a value system. It's, there's so many different cultures that have different views on sex and sexual relationships and human sexuality, that we just really have to wrap our heads around as well. United States of America and the plain normal vanilla Caucasian sex is not, the sex. It's not
Right.
the thing. And like you had said before too, is that BDSM, that is now gotten out of the psychiatric, evaluations of everything, and that's starting to become normal to people. The civilized vanilla sex that I like to call it.
Right. I mean, you can go into a store in the mall and find toys,
Mhm.
and the unfortunate thing about it is we have all of this sex talk that is happening on television and everything, but at the same time, we have more negative viewpoints about sex than we have in the past.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, culturally, what is happening right now in the US anyway, um, around the topic of sex, because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Again, as an educator teaching science and teaching sex ed, and having a script that had to be followed, um, that did not touch upon anything important about sexual health.
Yeah.
Just that is infuriating. And that is why we have these people, so many people now believing that they're sex addicts, when really what they're trying to do is understand themselves, and their own sexuality and their own sexual health. So anybody who's been labeled as a sex addict, I highly encourage them to find a professional who can prove that they have knowledge and they've taken more than 3 credits in college to get their doctorate degree. Um, just because somebody's a doctor doesn't mean that they know.
No.
That's why we have different kinds of doctors.
Yeah.
Just because you can go to your gynecologist and talk to your gynecologist about being a sex addict, but they may have only taken 2 classes on sexual health. They know all about the physiology of the body, but human beings are more than just our bodies.
Yeah.
And we've got our minds, bodies, spirits, and sexuality. All of this goes together, and if we're not taking care of all of that, then we're going to see some really, I don't even know how to say it. I'm thinking about you and how, I'll just say it like I would. There's going to be some disparaging energies there that are
Mhm.
not working well.
Yeah.
And then you get a couple together and you have A and B, and their energies are all screwed up because they're not looking at their sexual health. They might be great body, mind, and spirit, but what about sexuality? That has to come in.
And that also just, it plays into what we were saying before, is that if you guys are not on a full total connect, and we are all humans, don't get me wrong, we are going to disconnect a lot in life, even with our lifelong partners. We're going to have disconnects, but this is where I truly believe people are having sexual addiction-ish problems, or they're thinking their significant other was a sex addict, because I don't think that they were connected on that level. That's where sex coaches, that's where sex therapists comes in. They are they're specialized in sexology, so where we can connect on that level. And then, if need be, you can connect with a psychiatrist or a counselor on the emotional or the mind level or the past, stuff that might be coming and reoccurring in your life. Communication, key. connecting all of that together. And that's why I think maybe people do go out and they do seek those sexual needs on a more often basis than not, unfortunately, is because they're seeking it elsewhere because they're not connected with themselves or their partners at that time. And so they just find easy way out, easy fixes. I'm going to go cheat on my wife with this chick at the office because she came on to me and I know I can get it because my wife's not giving it to me. Instead of figuring out what's wrong, what's going on with my wife or my husband's life right now. What does he or she need? What can I do to feed her or him? And what can I say or do so they understand what they can do for me?
Right.
And yeah, that's
Then
my main thing.
there's that whole, the people who are alone and self-pleasure and masturbation being so hugely stigmatized in our community, and people who masturbate every day think that they're addicted to sex. No, you're not. And I'm gonna, you know, as you know, my niche, my specialty, what I focus on is uh, military, either moms, um, oh my goodness, when you're, 40 plus years old and your children are moving out of the house, and let's say you're a single mom and your children have moved out of the house and you have denied your own sexual needs for 15 years while you were taking care of your kids after your divorce, and now here you are and you want to explore that. And then suddenly you think that you're a sex addict because you're looking at porn or you're spending some money on sex toys or you're masturbating in your living room while you're reading a novel. That's not sex addiction.
No, no.
And just be aware that you may tell your friend that you're doing this, and your friend who has different values than you may tell you that there's something wrong with you, and most likely there's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
You
It's
know,
all
a woman,
really is. It's all about deferring values. And a husband and wife or a partnership also can be together for 30, 40 some years, 10, however long, a long time. And I don't know about you or anybody else in human world, but my values have changed. The older I've gotten, the more my values have changed. My religious values have changed. My sexual needs and values have changed. My relationship values have changed. And they are still changing. The more I learn, the more they still change. And maybe they won't anymore, but maybe they will. And I do know a lot of people out there too that don't want to change, but maybe their significant other is ready for change. They don't want this anymore. They don't want to, let's just say they're a Christian family. They went to church every day. And now that their kids are getting older and their kids are making their own religious decisions and their own life decisions, maybe let's say Frank doesn't want to effing go to church no more. Maybe Frank doesn't want his wife to go to Bible meetings every Wednesday night. Maybe Frank wants his wife to dress up in a teddy now that their kids are gone and throw that Bible down and go, hey, Frank, what's up? But she doesn't want to change anymore. And that's where the communication and the values and the responsibilities of life change. And I think that also can be a big disconnect too. I think sex addiction is exactly what sex addiction is defined as, is it a difference of values, period. And that if it's not my values, then you must be a sex addict. Or shit, my values have changed in life. And like you had said before, Sarah, who's a single mom or whatever, is diddling herself on the couch. Girl, get it. Get it. You are not a sex addict. You are just changing your values, you're changing your life, and you're finding yourself again. And just you need to do it. You need to do it. And other things too is maybe you do have a mental disorder, maybe you do have anxiety, maybe you do have depression, and you can't find any escape except for orgasming. Who gives a shit? That's my
right?
full on opinion, brash opinion about that. Who gives a shit if sex is the one way that you can calm yourself? Who gives a shit if you have to have sex 17 times a day and make yourself raw. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of a health problem there, but who cares what you're doing as long as it's healthy, consensual, adult, nothing with children, um, safe, consensual, healthy adult sex. And it's not causing
And
me
sane,
insane. Yes, sane for
you
sure.
know, and that's where, okay, yeah, if you are going out and you are finding strangers and you are just fucking everybody who you can find and moving from partner to partner and possibly spreading STIs and
Mhm.
doing that, then that's where we're going to look at you and say, okay, what is going on so that this is happening?
And
And
not like what's going on, like something's wrong with your brain. No, that's not what we mean. Like, what is going on? What do you need to feed? Why are you doing this?
yeah,
And
what are you getting out of this behavior?
yes, yep. And safe,
And
healthy, and safe. And, but if you are, wrapping your pecker and you're on birth control and you have all of these things and let's just say that you are on Tinder flipping left or right, whatever way you hook up, when you are meeting all of these strange people and you're doing it in a safe manner, is there anything wrong with that?
absolutely not.
No, no, as long as you're doing it in a safe manner. I mean, yes, there's
And
yes,
and communicating with them,
yes.
you know, and that's the thing. Are you communicating with people regardless of how you're doing it? It doesn't mean that you're a sex addict, but there are proper ways to do this. And you can go out and have sex with 17 different people if that's what you want to do. But are you communicating with them to not cause them harm?
Hmm.
And are you allowing them to communicate with you to not cause you harm?
Yes.
And that's, again, values and communication. There we go. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we have a hell of a lot more conversations about sex addiction than we're having about values, communication, and boundaries. And
Yeah,
that's the issue.
that is the
In our
issue.
society, it is not okay to have conversations about boundaries and my personal values and well, what the fuck? We need to change this a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's change this around and say, you know what? Let's take this conversation about sex addiction and put it off to the side. And let's have some real conversations about human beings communicating their values to each other, their
Hmm.
needs, their desires, and values and see what happens.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Even sitting
Yeah,
a couple down or sitting a mom and your niche is empty nesters and military moms, sitting them down and going, talk to yourself. Talk to yourself about your boundaries and your communication. Me sitting a couple down. Hey, Frank, talk to Sylvia there. Tell her why you don't want her to go to Bible camp anymore. Talk about
right.
it. Talk about what you need. And it's even gets people are just so scared and nervous about talking about just their genitalia alone. I don't know about you,
Uh-huh.
but that like when I am watching a film, I can feel my genitalia throbbing. Or girl, when you come out of that shower looking like a hot mess, you get me hard. Like people alone are just afraid to just blatantly say very specific reactions to their significant others or even to themselves. They're really scared.
Right.
Like their body
And get
reacts.
embarrassed about it.
Yeah, they do. I mean, and don't
And,
get
getting wet is nothing to be embarrassed about.
me wrong. No, no,
Getting a hard on is nothing to be embarrassed about. That is a normal
yes,
physiological response to something that brought you pleasure.
yeah,
And
definitely.
we shouldn't be embarrassed about that. But
No,
media tells us otherwise.
yes, that's the big thing is that we have been stuck in our minds from the time we were born to the time of now. That everything is telling us that sex and being sexual and who should be sexual, when, where, and how is just shoved in our minds. Sex is
Right.
embarrassing. If you don't look this way, you're embarrassing. If you do sex this way, you're just embarrassing. No,
Right.
no, and no.
Right.
And I
If you do
that,
sex this way or have sex this often or, whatever the labels are, then we're going to put you in a category of sex addict and tell you that there's something wrong with you. And I think that's why you and I both have really strong feelings about this because we could go and take 500 online surveys and every single one of them is going to tell us that we're sex addicts
yes.
because we think about sex often throughout the day. We, uh, yay, that's awesome. So Raya Ann said, um, love this. Yes, yes. And these are conversations that we want to be having often.
Yes.
Um, so I was on a rant about something and then I
Because when
lost
you
it
think
because I got excited that somebody was talking to us.
no, you were saying
So
that
yes, oh,
would go with
500,
my
every single one of those surveys is going to say that I'm a sex addict. Every single one of them. And I am 42 years old and for a lot of my life, I believed that there was something wrong with me
yeah.
because I was horny all the time.
Yeah.
And
Me
I'm a
too.
female. And how dare I
Yeah.
want sexual pleasure?
Hmm.
Shame on me. I'm a slut. I'm a sex addict. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? Now I'm married to a 28-year-old.
Go get
And you know, and it just we are able to have conversations about our sexual needs and that is what is most important. I've went through a divorce with my son's dad because one of the things is we weren't having that communication about sex and our needs. And I mean, that was just the tip of the iceberg there. But he was a very, very, very good, amazing, wonderful man. But we couldn't be married because we weren't having those discussions way in the beginning.
yeah.
And that made a difference.
Yeah.
And he thought that my what I wanted and needed and desired sexually was weird. So guess what I stopped doing? I stopped talking about it
Yeah.
and believed that it had something to do with, things that happened in the past or this or that or whatever. It didn't. I am a human being and human beings are animals and sex is part of our nature
Yes.
and it's okay to talk about it. In fact, it's necessary to talk about it for our own health.
It is. It is.
And I wish I would have known this when I was 20.
Yeah. And also just to kind of touch base too, when you had said that you would, something that you should have talked about the beginning. I just kind of want to reiterate too, for people who have been in a long-term relationship, yes, in your case, you probably should have started talking about that in the beginning. But people who are in long-term relationships, just because you haven't started talking about it in the beginning of a relationship does not mean you cannot start talking about it now and changing it
Right.
now. So,
And
yes,
that's what coaches are for. If I would have had a coach to help me have those conversations
yep,
when he was very, very, very reluctant to have those conversations, who knows?
yep,
But instead, I gave up, I internalized it, medicalized it, pathologized it, and how many people do that? Is
wow,
this why we're having so many divorces
yeah, yep,
and
yeah,
unsuccessful relationships? So
yes,
hopefully we open some people's minds today just to think about and question and talk about this, especially if you have somebody in your life who has been labeled or who you have thought of as a sex addict.
yes,
Because hopefully having some conversation about it and knowing that there are places where you can get resources and ask questions.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's the whole point of this today.
It is. It is. And if you guys do have more questions, or if we didn't touch base on something specific that you are really questioning, um, well, what about this? What about that? Is this considered a sex addict? And if we didn't touch base on, go ahead and ask. You can use either the private document that AJ has posted and ask on that anonymously. You can private message me. I don't mind that. I don't know about you, but I don't mind it. But either way, you can ask. You can even ask on the public forum, but ask away. Ask away. We're going to talk about sex addiction for a couple more days. And then sometime beginning of next week, we're going to touch base on another topic. If there's a topic that you want to talk about, let us know.
Yep. So there will be a poll coming up on Monday. And so that is going to be kind of the big overarching topic that Ashley and I will be talking about for that week. And we will give you lots more information next week once we have talked together about when our next live is going to be. We will start posting in advance so that you know and can plan if you are wanting to come on and watch our lives, because we're going to start doing that consistently the same day and time each week to make it easier for you to plan around those for those of you who want to watch and share.
Yay. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Awesome.
Hop on. Appreciate you.
Mwah. Have a good one, everybody.